Johnny Carson gilt als einer der bekanntesten Fernsehmoderatoren. Konnte sich fast mit jedem gut verstehen. Trotz seiner freundlichen Art war manchmal genervt von seinen Gassen. Hier sind einige Gast, die Johnny Carson nicht mochte. Bob Hope ist einer davon. Obwohl beide Großkomiker sind, war Beziehung nicht herzlich. Carson war bekannt für seine geschickten Interviews. Konnte spannende Gespräche führen. Berichten zufolge mochte Bob Hope nicht in seiner Show The Tonight Show. Der Grund war, dass Hope Star, vorbereitet Art nicht zu Carsons Stil passt. Bob Hope war ein berühmter Komiker. War oft zu Gast in der Tonight Show. Zu diesem Zeitpunkt war verwendet viel vorbereitet Witze die Karten. Viele Gast unterhielten sich natürlich mit Johnny Carson. Bob Hope wollte jedoch seine einstudierten Witze erzählen. Erwartet, dass Carson in für die Scherzanspruch. Dadurch fühlten sich die Interviews weniger wie Gesprächen. Sie workten mehr wie ein geprovis Comedy-Programm. Carson fand das anscheinend langweilig nicht inspirierend. Ein weiterer wichtiger Grund war, dass Hope kein besonders interessanter Gesprächspartner war. Carson let von Spontaneität, aber bei Hope waren die Interviews vorhersehbar gleichformig. Hopes Teen schickt oft ein List mit the men vorgefertigten Witzen in die Produzenten der Tonight Show. Dadurch wurde Carson mehr zu einem Requisit als zu einem Interviewer. Dies fehlende echte Interaktion frustriert Carson. Beschrieb das Interviewen von Hope einmal als das Sprechen mit einer großen Werbemaskin. Außerdem bedeutet Hopes Status als Hollywood-Gross, dass die Tonight Show oft verpflichtet war, in einzuladen. Das war unabhängig davon, ob etwas Neues oder Interessantes zu beichten hat. Im Gegensatz zu anderen Gassen, die unterhalten oder persönlich geschickten Teilen wollten, waren Hopes Auftritt often ein neues Special oder Projekt gebunden. Joan Rivers Johnny Carson hatten eine komplizierte Beziehung. Sie begann als Freundschaft Mentorschaft, entwickelt sich aber zu tiefem Groll. Zu Beginn ihrer Karriere war Rivers der Lieblingsgast von Carson in der Show The Tonight Show. Schätzte ihren schnellen Verstand, ihren mutigen Humor ihre Fähigkeit, scharf Gespräch zu führen. Oft lud sie als Gastmoderatorin ein. Doch 1986 ändert sich ihre berufliche Beziehung dramatisch. Carson begann, Rivers nicht mehr zu mögen Verbot schließlich, in seiner Show aufzutreten. Zuerst unterstützt Carson Rivers. Gab in 1965 ein ersten großen Chancen im nationalen Fernsehen. Quickly became a regular and even served as Carson's frequent guest host in the early 1980s. This led many to believe she was being groomed as his successor. However, despite their on-air chemistry, Carson reportedly found Rivers difficult to manage at times. She was known for her brash personality and aggressive humor, which sometimes clashed with Carson's more controlled, smooth style of hosting. The real reason Carson came to dislike having Rivers on his show wasn't about her humor but rather a deep personal betrayal, at least in his eyes. In 1986, Rivers accepted an offer to host The Late Show starring Joan Rivers on Fox, making her the first woman to have her own late-night talk show. However, she did not inform Carson personally before the deal was announced. Carson felt blindsided and deeply betrayed, seeing her move as an act of disloyalty. When Rivers tried to call him to explain, he refused to take her calls and never spoke to her again. Following this fallout, Carson banned Rivers from The Tonight Show, a decision that remained in effect for nearly 30 years. Even after Carson retired, his successor Jay Leno upheld the ban out of respect for Carson. Rivers did not return to The Tonight Show until 2014 when Jimmy Fallon took over Wayne Newton. Johnny Carson and Wayne Newton had one of the most notorious feuds in late night. Carson mod oft Witze über Newton in der Show The Tonight Show. Likte über Newtons Auffälligen Stille sein Auftritt. Carson Tiden, das Newton nicht so manlich war wie der Künstler. Viele der Prominent likten über Carsons Witze. Newton nahm die Witze jedoch persönlich. War stolz auf seinen Erfolg. Mochte es nicht, ständig verspottet zu werden. Die Spannung Watches, als Newton Carson direkt ansprach. Newton hat einen guten Ruf in Las Vegas. Ignoriert Carsons Kommentar nicht. Berichten zufolge ging Watten zu Carson. Carson's office and physically intimidated him, warning him to stop the jokes. According to some accounts, Newton's message was clear: if the jokes didn't stop, there would be consequences. Carson, who was known for being in control of his show and never backing down from a joke, was reportedly shaken by the encounter. He was not the kind of person to engage in physical confrontations, and Newton's aggressive approach left a lasting impression. After the incident, Carson noticeably reduced his jokes about Newton, but the damage to their relationship was done because of this history. Carson reportedly did not enjoy having Newton as a guest. While he maintained professionalism on air, he likely found Newton's presence uncomfortable, knowing the tension that existed between them. Unlike other guests who played along with Carson's humor, Newton had taken things to a personal level, something that Carson disliked. In the end, Carson and Newton's feud became one of the few instances where Carson's comedy backfired. Newton's refusal to be the butt of a joke and his willingness to confront Carson made for a strange relationship that never fully recovered. Mr. Rogers, Johnny Carson and Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers, were two titans of television, but their styles couldn't have been more different. Carson, known for his sharp wit, sarcasm, and an ability to poke fun at guests, thrived on humor, spontaneity, and lively conversation. Fred Rogers on the O. Rogers war Anders als Andir Gast. Hat keinen Platz für seinen typischen Humor. Johnny Carson konnte Andir Gast necken und Scherzen. Doc Rogers war ruhig und ernst. Das macht es schwer, witzig zu sein. Rogers wollte nicht einfach unterhalten. Wollte Botschaften von Freundlichkeit, Verständnis und Bildung für Kinder verbreiten. Viele Menschen schätzten seine Ehrlichkeit. Aber das ließ wenig Raum für Carsons Humor. Die Interviews fühlten sich langsamer und weniger lebhaften. Außerdem war Rogers bekannt als ein fast Heiligfigur im Kinderfernsehen. Das macht es schwierig für Carson, wie einen normalen Gast zu behandeln. Guest joking too much at his expense could make Carson look mean-spirited, something he wanted to avoid. At the same time, he couldn't fully engage Rogers in light-hearted conversation the way he could with other public figures. This created a kind of conversational dead zone where Carson struggled to keep the energy high, making for an interview that felt stilted and unnatural. Another reason Carson may have disliked having Rogers on was that The Tonight Show was built for a more adult late-night audience. Rogers, with his gentle discussions about feelings and childhood development, simply wasn't the kind of guest who fit well with the show's tone. Though Carson respected Roger work, their differing styles made for an uncomfortable dynamic. Carson likely found Roger appearances challenging, not because of any personal animosity but because their television personas simply didn't mesh well. Charlton Hahn. Johnny Carson was known for his ability to make guests feel at ease using humor and quick wit to create engaging conversations. However, some guests proved difficult for him to interview, and Charlton Hahn was one of them. While Carson never publicly expressed outright dislike for Hahn, there were several reasons why he reportedly didn't enjoy having the legendary actor on The Tonight Show. One of the main issues was Hahn's serious and often rigid demeanor. Known for his roles in epic films like Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, and Planet of the Apes, Hahn carried himself with the gravitas of an old Hollywood leading man. Unlike many actors who were willing to joke around and engage in light-hearted banter, Hahn often remained formal and intense. Carson, who thrived on spontaneity and playfulness, likely found this stiffness challenging, as it made it harder to create an entertaining interview. Additionally, Hahn had a reputation for being long-winded and overly serious when discussing his film's politics or personal beliefs. He tended to give lengthy, self-important answers rather than engaging in quick back-and-forth conversation. Carson preferred guests who could keep the energy high and match his wit, and Hahn's solemn style didn't lend itself well to that dynamic. Another source of tension may have been Hahn's outspoken political views. A staunch conservative and later a prominent advocate for gun rights as the president of the NRA, Hahn's opinions sometimes clashed with the more centrist or liberal leaning entertainment. While Carson generally avoided political controversy, he was known to poke fun at both sides, and it's possible that Hahn didn't appreciate being the subject of jokes. Overall, Carson likely found Hahn to be a difficult guest because their styles didn't mix well. Where Carson wanted live, humorous exchanges, Hahn brought a commanding but overly serious presence that didn't fit The Tonight Show's late-night entertainment atmosphere. While always professional, Carson reportedly found interviews with Hahn to be more of a chore than an enjoyable conversation. Harry Belafonte. Johnny Carson, the king of late-night television, was known for his smooth, easygoing interview style, but certain guests presented challenges for him. One such guest was Harry Belafonte, the celebrated singer, actor, and civil rights activist. While Carson respected Bond's talents and